Welcome to our exploration of care anti-clinical studio. My name is Alisson Quiñones, and this is our graduate design studio 5. I will start this presentation by introducing you to our site, the Salud Health Medical Centers. Our site is located on the corner of Colfax and Airport. I will begin by taking you through a quick study of the city of Aurora and its history. The city of Aurora was originally named the town of Fletcher, and it was incorporated into the city as in the year 1891. And then it was later renamed the town of Aurora by the year 1907. Their population was very small and kind of started growing throughout the years. By the year 1980, Aurora had become the third largest city in Colorado with a population of 158,000 people. And it started doubling after that. By the year 2020, they currently have 382,000 people and still increasing. By the year 2070, they're expected to have about 715,000 people. And I'm going to take you through a site analysis as well. My first part of the analysis looks at businesses and education around our site and how close they are. Kind of by walking distances. As you can see, there is a lot of businesses to the west of our site, and also the schools are placed in this section as well, but to the east, since there's more open spaces, there's nothing really kind of there. Also looking at parks and just recreational facilities surrounding our site, nothing really within walking distance as well. There is plenty of green spaces in the city kind of surrounding it, but nothing really too close as well. We have golf courses. We also have the Sand Creek Greenway that kind of goes around this section here, and smaller parks kind of around it, but nothing within walking distance. Looking at site access, we have the Highline Canal Trail, which kind of goes really close to our site and surrounding it too. There are plenty of trails and bike paths that surround our site for entertainment purposes. And as far as moving and the bus or the RTD, there are plenty of stations that run along the Colfax road as well as the airport. So there's plenty of access to get to our site, and the RTD bus stops will drop you off right in front of our site. We are within the airport's influence district, which has noise sound levels, and we are within the lowest point of the sound level, except for our lowest southeast corner of our site. But this is still kind of okay within the city. They regulate this because we are close to the Buckley Air Force Base. Because we are close to the Buckley Air Force Base, we are also looking at crash zones that are kind of placed around the city. So they have to stick sort of within these boundaries, but this boundary also hits the bottom part or the south part of our site. So this will be taken into account when we look at where the placement of the residential units will be, as we don't want any permanent residential areas kind of being there. We want something to be temporary. Also looked at the crime and traffic accidents around the site. There is lots of crime on the residential areas right on the south part of our site, and really all throughout Aurora, but there's nothing really in the southeast section. There have been a lot of accidents along the Colfax Avenue just because it is a highway. So this is something that we have to look at for noise kind of buffering as well. I will now take you through my design intent of the sort of the master plan. I'm using biophilic design as an initiative to create a connection to our site, just thinking about the services that it can provide to its community, and also all the other surrounding communities, to promote this wellness from the inside out. The healthier you feel inside, the healthier you're reflecting yourself outside. Another part of my design intent is to create connections through the use of materials and colors, as well as the circulation of spaces and the natural system placements. This is looking at green spaces and how people move throughout the master plan. In looking at the master plan, I also looked at how I would lay out these spaces, and I looked at just building a base grid that would help kind of guide my design. I looked at having these vertical grids going from the public to the private spaces in the buildings themselves, as well as the green spaces, kind of the most public spaces, the most private spaces would be towards the south, and how these kind of overlay, which helped me create a grid system for my buildings. In looking at these grid systems, I looked at how the circulations would work around them. So looking at vehicular circulations, these are all around the site, and some immediate access to parking as soon as you get in. The cars would not move inside the site. Bike circulation is also taken into consideration, looking at kind of the main pathways around the site and how you can move through freely without also disturbing the pedestrians. And then the pedestrian circulation is all around the exterior. And as they're entering from the most public spaces, which is the medical center area, towards the residential and the more private spaces, they're actually going underground, sort of underground. But they are free to move throughout the whole site, as there is plenty of walking spaces and open spaces. Looking at this circulation, it helped me sort of lay out where these program spaces would be located. So the light gray areas are the program spaces. The green, of course, are the green open spaces, and the spaces that have a texture to them are adaptive or porous spaces that would create either shade or can be used for other purposes rather than something prescribed. So in looking at this, I laid out my basic program layouts, which would mean having the shopping area on this corner here, which is the most public. The clinic would be on this section here. The residential would be towards the west of our site, as well as any community services would be located towards the middle section. These are just some developments on studies on verticality of our buildings and how they can create this kind of guide from the public spaces to the most private spaces. Not only are you doing that horizontally, but also vertically as you're going down into the ground. These are just some site sections looking at, again, this playing in, pushing and pulling on the buildings and how you move throughout those spaces into the rest of the site. And focusing a little more into the medical center itself, I started laying out these programmatic squares that can be either pushed or pulled in to form a building. So I started by creating this grid, kind of following that same grid pattern from the master plan, pulling those apart to create access in between the sites so that you can go from one site to the other to another programmed space without having to go around the building. I later on looked at stacking these buildings to create another program space on top that spreads throughout. And finally, grouping these spaces by creating porous transitional spaces in between these buildings as well, which helped me kind of look at my program and how I'm going to spread those out in the medical center itself. Looking at the first building here would be the main clinic, where the healthy patients would go in for their checkups. These would have lab spaces as well as doctor's offices for their visits. In the opposite side would be the acute care center, which would have all like the sick people or the ones who are feeling ill would go in for their emergency services, which would help them get faster services than scheduling them on a regular clinic. We then have the dental health center, which would have the admin spaces as well to occupy in that space. And the behavioral health center would be on the opposite side of that. And then and the telemedicine center would be there as well. And finally, on the stacked portion on the above of the ground would be the open spaces, cafeteria, classrooms, and learning spaces, as well as open waiting rooms, which have that porous access back into either the clinic or the acute care center as well. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I will now leave you with a flight over of my master plan. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great evening.